Hey everyone, um, welcome to the PNOE webinar, one of our episodes. And today we have some folks from Optimize joining us. We have Dr. Scott and Jerry. Welcome, guys, and very much appreciate the time.
Thanks for having us, Panos. We love the PNOE as a company and as a device. I'm Jerry Smith. I'm a physician assistant. I am one of the co-founders, along with my partner Josh Hudson, whom you're aware of, that
Yes.
for Optimize we now have 33 active clinical sites that are geared around hormone optimization and athletic recovery and performance and longevity in general. We are centered in Paducah, Kentucky, the mecca of hormones, but our companies span literally coast to coast here in the United States. We are using the PNOE device, and I'll get into how we use it in a moment. My partner here that's with me today is Dr. Scott Howell. He's our PhD. Scott, you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm the research director of Optimize. I do the training for the hormones, and Jerry works with me on that. We both do it. Basically, all our education for our practitioners is developed by me and Jerry. And so we have a lot of people that use PNOE right now, and I'll give my insights on the exercise science portion of it when warranted.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, guys. And for our listeners, the reason why we were very excited about doing this webinar with the team from Optimize is because it's one of our very successful case studies of how PNOE has been able to support a multi-facility franchise operating in multiple states. And from what I understand now, you guys are already in 30 plus facilities, which is amazing. I remember when we started talking to you guys last year, it was probably around 15, and you guys have, almost doubled in less than a year, which is, incredible. A very big part of PNOE's success, and I think the overall success that Optimize has had as a franchise, is what Dr. Scott touched upon briefly, which is education and enabling the personnel that you have on the ground to be able to be proficient about the services that are being offered, being able to very clearly explain to customers why they need to follow X, or why, Y option is probably better for someone else. The overall orchestration of this new age longevity clinic, which, I'm guessing a lot of people from the audience are trying to set up, and there may be struggling with questions about how do I fit everything together? What is the mechanism for getting the ops going? Because at the end of the day, let's face it, when it comes to setting up an integrative medicine clinic, a longevity clinic, execution is probably the number one beast you need to tame in order to be successful. Without further ado, I just want to say that I've had the chance of interfacing with quite a few of the members from the Optimize management team. We're very, very excited to have you as customers. And I think, Jerry, why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about, what is being offered by the Optimize franchise, double clicking on the services, and then a little bit of background about, how PNOE works as part of the glue that, brings everything together.
Sure. In terms of services in our clinics and our facilities, that is, primarily it's about hormone optimization, men and women, menopausal, premenopausal, men with low T symptomology. But when you get into that, there can be some nebulous, the track record of the bodybuilding world has tainted the industry to an extent. So for those of you thinking you're going to start a hormone company, what we said on the front end is absolutely imperative, and that's education. So you have to stand on the literature. You have to take this data, and that's why it requires somebody smarter than me, like Scott, to unpack some of that and try to make sense of how do you meld this into the guidelines that currently exist and the data. So we do a lot of hormone, nerdy, detailed hormone kind of stuff. And inside of the athletic recovery component, we're offering services like cryogenic therapy, both with air-driven cryo and like cold plunge water tanks. We could get into the nerdy parts of cold shock proteins and norepinephrine release. We do a lot of infrared sauna work. We fully believe that the Swedish studies showing lower blood pressures and increased metabolic activity with frequent sauna usage is real. We used compression therapy, which is, some of you may know it as like lymphedema boots, but basically you're driving lactate out and letting new nutrients come in after you've had an event like a run or a bicycle or a heavy lift like squat day for your legs. And then we also use red light therapy, which has become a large popular thing to do. If you watch a lot of podcasts talking about like collagenous deposition and anti-aging and appearance and other uses for red light. And then we roll in the things like PNOE as part of how do we have a metric for improvement? How do we rope all this in and you have a patient and a provider relationship where you say, look, I'm doing all these things. I'm taking these supplements. I'm doing my hormones. I'm coming in. I'm doing cryotherapy and infrared. But am I getting better? Do I feel better? But how do you track better? And what I love about PNOE is I think it integrates a lot of factors for us into a palatable way for the patient to see, like, I am getting better, or I'm doing the right thing with my body for these reasons. And it also helps the provider say, look, you're not focusing on the right areas. I know you're eating a lot of protein, but is that necessarily right for how you're lifting, how your genetics are? And so I love the PNOE because it integrates a lot of things into one platform to see. In terms of how we're utilizing it, I think currently we have 20-ish devices that are actively in use with our company. I think that's the number. We are mostly doing the resting test. We are trying to get every clinic to expand into the more active testing because I believe that serological biomarkers are just one piece of the puzzle. And as this evolves, there has to be a conversation about breath testing or metabolic testing. There probably has to be a discussion about genetic testing. I'm sure Scott will weigh on some of that here in a moment. But PNOE has truly, again, I can't underscore enough, pulled together how we track these patients, how we keep them motivated to improve, because it's almost like a game with them. They want to see what their PNOE does after 6 months of lifestyle change, and that's how we're utilizing the devices in my clinics.
Dr. Scott, over to you if you want to add something there before I maybe touch upon some of the things that Jerry mentioned.
Well, basically, there were three things that I come up as major benefits to our patients. The first was to determine caloric requirements, because if you go into any nutrition text, any exercise science text, they talk about establishing your baseline calories. And without understanding how many calories you can intake per day to maintain your weight, you don't have a starting point to actually start improving body composition. The second part was to adjust caloric requirements during different phases of different nutrition, like caloric restriction phases to lose body weight and improve body composition, and body stabilization phases. We have a thing called adaptive thermogenesis that happens. And so basically, after a period of caloric restriction, say 4 to 6 weeks, your body goes into adaptive thermogenesis. Well, one way to get around that is to stabilize the body weight and increase the caloric intakes back up to the new set point for the body, the new lean body mass that's over a period of time, 4 to 6 weeks, before going into another phase of caloric restriction, or if it's someone that's resistance training, a phase of caloric surplus for training. And so basically understanding the baseline requirements and then being able to adjust the requirements as someone loses body weight or improves their body composition, that's a big issue for me. And the other is to monitor post-exercise recovery and metabolic efficiency. There's metrics like EPOC, but also by monitoring the recovery, you can periodize the training and auto-regulate your individual training. And so if you see that your performance metrics are going down and you have the data from the PNOE, you can auto-regulate your training based on that. And also to organize the training in reference intervals per the biomotor ability or quality or goal that the patient wants, whether it be to improve body composition, whether it be to improve physical strength, like absolute strength, muscular endurance, or just cardiorespiratory fitness.
No, that's a very interesting overview, basically laying out the ways by which information from PNOE can be useful for someone. And, I really want to highlight what Jerry mentioned, which is, there's blood work, there's urine testing, there's all these markers that we can run, by doing lab work. But the thing is that none of these are actually functional, and none of these actually measure the true response or the direct operation of the systems participating in metabolism. Because metabolism isn't just like burning calories. Metabolism is the combined process of delivering oxygen in order to process fats, carbohydrates, nutrients in general, and then the clearance of carbon dioxide. And this entire chain involves multiple different systems, right? It involves the lungs, it involves the heart, it involves blood circulation, it involves the cells, the mitochondria within the cells, and then it also involves the nervous system. And that's why, when we talk about metabolism, we're referring to a process that is multifactorial. It comprises multiple different systems. And the beauty of breath analysis is that it's the only assessment really known to science that can individually analyze the direct operation of these systems participating in one's metabolism. And it can do that without doing lab work, getting biomarkers in an invasive manner, sending things, to labs, which is costly, not always time efficient, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I do believe, that Jerry's 100% right. There has to be, an addition of functional testing in order to understand what is happening with an individual's body. Obviously, the point that I'm trying to make is not that, breath analysis is the end all be all. There's obviously a lot of value in doing blood work and other types of assessment, but ultimately, you can test a lot of markers that are telling you whether something is moving in the right direction or not, but you also need a marker that is showing you directly whether a system is working well or not. As I said, the other major benefit is the direct nature of, measuring all of that. Jerry and Scott, do you mind sharing a little bit of information about, how you guys have planned the rollout, the operational rollout of something like PNOE? And, it may be a process that you guys follow for other services or treatments. But I think it's important and interesting for our audience to understand how you operationalize something like PNOE within a franchise like yours.
Well, for us, on the front end, when we onboard a patient and they come to us in consult for usually, a set of symptoms that include fatigue, weight loss, maybe low libido, maybe or maybe not postmenopausal symptoms in a female. Not only do we use lab testing as, a primary tool of, interrogating the situation, and a sit down with a provider in our clinics that usually is more than an hour of discussion about their activity level, their health, their history, a basic history taking medically, as well as performance questionnaires. But then I have all my patients that are intake on the front end do a PNOE test. They'll do the resting test. And so when I see them in consult, I don't only talk about their labs. I'm talking about their PNOE results. And then we get into what their goals are. And then we get into how we can modify whatever factors it be to reach those goals, and then use again PNOE as a metric of improvement over time. That's how we roll it out currently. I think there'll be some extension of that once we start doing more active testing on more of the athletic geared people. But that's how I utilize it for now. I do it on every single new patient, and then I recommend they do it about every 3 to 6 months, depending on their goals, to look at these metrics.
And Scott, any thoughts about how you train people on, the different modalities, again, doesn't necessarily have to apply to PNOE, but it could apply to pretty much everything you guys do in terms of training and education.
As far as like specific training modalities?
Yeah. So when it comes to preparing your staff to be able to, perform a PNOE test or perform another service, like, is there anything in specific that you guys do differently when it comes to education, preparing your staff to be able to support the different services and treatments that you provide?
Well, at the moment, I don't have a comment on that, because usually what I do is I vet all any services we take on. I vet those and I look at, okay, what is the scientific evidence supporting what is there? And so with PNOE, it wasn't hard. It only took me about 15 minutes to start pulling the validation studies and things like that, to look at that and have that information. And it was a check off for me in the very beginning. Once I saw that and I looked at the comparison, I was set on it. So it was a recommendation. I'm good with this.
No, totally. No, and I very much appreciate your comment. Jerry, you also mentioned that Kentucky is the starting point, or like the motherland. I don't remember what term you used for hormone therapy or something like that. Why is that, if I may?
Well, I say that somewhat tongue in cheek. Most people that know the region wouldn't think that the middle of nowhere Kentucky would have babied and fostered a hormone company that now is nationwide, but it did. And we operate in some larger cities, but our parent store was in Paducah, Kentucky, where I'm sitting today, is a city of 40-ish thousand people. So you wouldn't think that you could form a company with over 10,000 patients base from that environment, but we did. And I think that probably speaks to not only metabolic dysfunction that exists here in the Corn Belt, based on high carbohydrate diets and whatnot, but also I think it also speaks to people's willingness to look at new ways of testing, to go off the curve of modern Western medicine that is more on a reactive model. Our whole company's goal is to be a more proactive model. I want to test things and give you prevention, not wait until you have diabetes to treat you. And so I like that preventative, non-Western traditional model. And it's kind of laughable to see that it comes from Kentucky. But back to your prior point of how we roll this out to staff, let alone to patients. We typically do things as a video informative rollout. So, we make in-house educational films and have all our medical assistants and nursing staff and even provider staff kind of go through that, so that everybody's on the same page of how do we educate our staff to educate patients, and how do we perform the testing appropriately and efficiently. So we make in-house videos. In fact, Dr. Hal's involved in a lot of that, in terms of we have our own Category 1 in-house CME for providers. Like, that's a program we've been working on, and some of our educational stuff involves testing matrices, like PNOE is one that's in our educational videos for our in-house people.
Oh no, that's very, very good to know. And so going back to your point about scaling hormone optimization business from the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, can you talk to us a little bit about what type of audience do you currently address, and who do you think was the driving force? What audience do you think was the driving force behind the expansion of your business? And do you see like a diversity there? How do you go from one facility to 30 facilities in terms of the positioning that you have for the different types of people that you could treat?
That's a really interesting question. So let's go back to where we are as a country, as a population, as an aging population, an unhealthy population. So I think as time unfolds, what you see with the advent of social media and outlets like YouTube or podcasting in general, you start to see this trend, this shift in ideology of how do we get more healthy, and what do we do about these complaints we see every day? And so the population of people that we target are those, 30 to 70-ish-year-olds that are of health-minded orientation, our own ilk, that want to be stronger, they want to live longer. I don't know that it's just a function of lifespan so much as it is a function of health span. And when I say that, what I mean is, if you and I both die at age 90 or 85, pick a number, but I died in a nursing home and you died out mowing your yard at age 90, who did better in terms of health span? Well, you did. And so I think what we're starting to see, if anything, from perhaps events like COVID, maybe it has been a seminal event, or sentinel event rather, that opened people's eyes to, hey, there's more onus on me as a person to be healthier, or whatever healthier means to them. And so, you get into that market of how do we truly address that age group and that population that wants to have their hormones optimized, that wants to go to the gym and know what they're doing with it, that wants to eat more appropriately, that wants to have a metric of longevity. And back to where we started, I think that's why we expanded as fast as we did. In terms of how we expanded, that's more of a discussion of, you treat businesses like a house fire. You stay low and you keep moving. You keep the overhead as low as you can within reason, but you offer good quality services at a price that people can afford. We currently integrate more than, I think, 25 physicians, 22 physicians and mid-levels into the business, and we hand select those people. You can't just come to us and open one of our stores. You have to be one of us. You have to really drink the Kool-Aid of what we're doing and demonstrate that through all the prerequisites that are required for us to bring you in-house and allow you to have one of our franchises.
Totally. No, that's a super important point. I'm referring to the last one, and just a little bit of experience on our end, because we've been in the space for roughly 7 years now, and we've seen actually franchises go boom and bust. We've seen the rise and fall of many. I would say that selecting the right people to become your ambassadors, because your franchisees are basically your ambassadors. They are the ones out there communicating, propagating your message. So selecting them and making sure that they're in line with your, vision and your practices, and the way you approach things is, of paramount importance. It's the, cornerstone of building a business. A lot of people tend to think that, franchisees are outside of the organization, but they are very much a part of the organization. And, if you view it the other way around, most likely you're going to create something that will have a pretty high likelihood of failure. And as I said, again, we've seen that happening multiple times. Going back to the question about the audience and who you're selling to, I 100% agree with you. There is an undeniable trend around, I want to live longer and better, and this trend is pervasive. You see in Andrew Huberman's talks, 21-year-olds, and then you also see 70-year-olds, and they more or less have the same question in mind. How do I live longer and better? But these two people are fundamentally different people. So the question that we have, you have, I guess pretty much all of our listeners have, is how do you talk to them? Is the message that you have for, the very disparate audiences that you're addressing, are there common denominators? Is the messaging different? Or is it the same, which would make the life of a marketeer working for a company like yours super easy? Or for, our life as well, because we do provide a lot of marketing support for our affiliates. So I would like to get your thoughts on that.
That's an interesting question as well. If you're focusing more on, the primary arm of our business, so let's talk about hormones in general and lifespan, health span discussion inside of that. What's interesting to see unfold is why are we seeing 20-year-olds that need this discussion? I mean, it's understandable as we age and we lose, a male loses 1% per year of testicle function after age 32 or 3. That's expected, but why do we see 20-year-olds with it? Why in the 1950s did we see higher baseline total testosterone than we see 30, 40 years later? I think it's a function of not only do we have less laborious jobs and probably more carbohydrate, convenient-driven food sources, and you could get nerdy and start talking about what's in our water table, that we're drinking, like endocrine disrupting compounds is one. But the message for those things is somewhat the same for a 25-year-old as it is a 70-year-old, but they have different goals. Now you're getting into, I'm 70 and I want to talk about why my joints hurt and I have erectile dysfunction, versus I'm 25 and I'm just tired and fat. And so, there are nuances to the discussion, but at the end of the day, health optimization is optimization. I feel like, I still want the 20-year-old and the 70-year-old to have a reasonably healthy lifestyle from a diet, exercise standpoint, from a hormone standpoint. I don't think that an 80-year-old or 70-year-old needs the exact hormone profile of a 25-year-old. I don't believe that, but I do think there are similarities and correlates.
No, totally, yeah. And if you were to give us a little bit of a estimation of how the age distribution looks like in your client base, would you say you have a normal distribution centered around whatever the mean is between 30 and 70, or would you say that there is some skewness in one side or the other?
I think the middle of the bell curve is going to be like in the 40s.
Okay.
And that's male and female. And the reason for that is I think, the magical 40 mark is when males start perceiving our mortality. We perceive we're weaker, we're fatter, we're more tired. Perhaps there's more life stress because 40 years old, now you're hitting the bell curve of in their careers. Where are they? Maybe higher stress environments. And females, I think in the 40s is where you start to see a lot of perimenopausal complaints, not necessarily fulminant menopause, but that's what drives the patient to start Googling, how do I get healthy? What do I do about this? And then in that slightly younger crowd, in that 25 to 35 crowd, they're more tech savvy. Typically, these are the people that have been watching podcasts since birth. These are the people that have had phones in their hands all the time, constantly scrolling, the Instagram feeds. And so that's, I think 40 is where you start seeing more volume of patients. To answer your question there, but it's not uncommon for me on a given clinical day interviewing patients to talk to a 20-something-year-old and the next patient's a 70-year-old. And they both watch the same podcast.
Oh, wow. No, I think personally that makes the life of, a business owner like you a lot easier because, you're talking the same language, you're using the same terms. Yes, there is a little bit of customization that needs to be done based on the goal. As you said, one person has, ED and, joint pain. The other person just wants to have a six-pack, whatever. But, at the end of the day, the fundamental nature of optimization is pretty much the same, right? And, this is very much ingrained into how we think about programming in PNOE. We are big believers of the fact that, ultimately it's the oxygen chain that matters, your lungs, your heart, your blood circulation, and your cells. And no matter if you're like 20 or 100 years old, what you need to do is you need to understand, how this chain is working and understand what system in this chain is deficient, and then apply the right sort of remedial action based on what system is deficient.
Right.
What is next for Optimize You? So there's a ton of competition out there. You guys know that, much better than I do. And I'm sure we have a lot of listeners in our crowd, either running clinics or considering to open clinics. And they're like, okay, how do I differentiate? What do I do? How do I stand out of the crowd?
Well, I certainly think there's probably a lot of opinions to that, but my spin on it would be this. I said this earlier, and I truly mean it. You have to stand on the literature. So I think there are a lot of companies that have a more superficial view of all these services. They do what's popular because it's popular, not because they ever researched how it works or why it works or how to truly manage the long-term use of it. PNOE being one, any service we offer, cryotherapy, sauna, hormones, all of them. And so I think if you're going to get into this business and you're going to succeed, You got to drink the Kool-Aid. You have to understand what you're doing, why it works, who it works on, who it doesn't work for. And furthermore, it can't, the practice of medicine. So, most of your listeners probably are medical oriented. They may not be physicians or mid-levels. They may be nurses. They may be physical therapists. They may be chiropractic. There's, I personally know some dentistry people that own longevity clinics. Just because we're doing a service doesn't necessarily mean it's truly medically sound. And so I feel like these people should do some legwork and not just make it about profit. The commercialization of medicine is a problem. That's what got us here to start with industries like Big Pharma, is trying to generate a dollar. So I would much rather make $1 off 10,000 people than I would make $10,000 off one person. And so I like to stratify these services out, make them affordable and attainable to the average income person that needs it just as much or more than a wealthy person.
Well, I mean, that's first of all, like, I think sound business advice, but then on the other hand, that's also very ethical and moral advice, because, if you're the business of selling healthcare services, profit shouldn't be the only factor. Of course, it should be one of the factors, but perhaps not the primary factor. And there are, certainly many more considerations, including perhaps first and foremost, actually giving back to the people you're serving and actually delivering better health outcomes. Jerry, when it comes to sort of like, being able to fence off competition and staying true to your vision, how do you guys select franchisees? Like, do you advertise your brand? Like, do you have inbounds, people coming to you asking to open up a facility? How is, growth looking in terms of the strategy?
Yeah, we don't have outlets where we advertise like, hey, we would like someone to open a clinic. That's not what we do. We typically have people come to us that have researched us. Either they know people we know, or they know providers, or perhaps they were, I have a couple situations where they were patients and then became owner operators later. They were medical people to start with, but they were patients.
We've had a few cases of PNOE customers that started
right.
as, patients like that. In fact, we had one who was running a solar panel company. They saw us in one of the trade shows. I think it was the Dondai Summit, the first Dondai Summit by
Nice.
Brian Johnson. There was such a huge line of people to get a PNOE test done. This person saw the line by the booth and like, if there's so many people lining up to do a test, I might as well just open a longevity clinic and
let me tell you, we were in was that the Californian? I think that was in the Los Angeles event that we all attended, not the Vegas one, but the Los Angeles one. And I went to one of our companies. Shout out to our friends at Ladera Ranch at the med spa there. And so we went to their booth that they had at the event, and they were doing PNOE, and it was literally they had 2 days pre-scheduled. Once people started to see what it was doing, they couldn't do them fast enough. Literally, they were full and could do no more capacity. It was impressive.
Yeah. And, for those who have been to the A4M in Vegas or West Palm Beach, you guys come by the PNOE booth, you're going to see what Jerry and I are talking about in real life. It's utter chaos of people trying to get a PNOE test done. Yeah. So, Jerry and Scott, I think we covered a lot of interesting stuff, and I'm sure that many of our listeners may have questions. So I would like to open it up to some Q&A. Guys, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the panel if you want to ask questions for Jerry, Scott, or myself, and we can spend a few minutes to talk about them.
Sure. Hopefully nothing so nerdy we can't answer it.
We'll try our best.
We'll see. Yeah, but while we're waiting on those to come in, back to prior comment, I feel like Medicine is a business. We were kind of hitting on that, ultimately trying to not be greedy with it. But even insurance-driven care, which my clinics are all cash-driven, maybe should have said that up front, is we don't take
Oh, yeah.
insurance. But even if you took insurance, it's still a business, right? You're still billing a service and making a dollar on it in the back end. I think you just have to be cognizant of it. Medicine also has a moral compass. You have to do what's right for the patient first, let alone the profit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can join a hedge fund or join finance in general. As a career,
You can go.
it's
There's
going
all
to
kinds of ways
offer
to make
much
money.
better risk-adjusted returns. I have a lot of friends in finance, and trust me, they make a lot more money for the time and risk they're undertaking. So if you're in it for
Right.
the money or just the money, then
Go do something else.
it's the wrong industry. So pick something else.
Right.
Okay, so I have some questions coming in from Jackie. Oh, yeah. Hi, Jackie.
Hi,
What is
Jackie.
Yeah. What is the future of breath analysis and testing? Well, breath analysis is a brave new world, is a new frontier in clinical diagnostics, and PNOY, I would say, is in the forefront. We have many exciting updates for our hardware and our software. And I think for us, the future is making breath analysis as accessible as it could ever be. Whether that means making the report better, making the report more informative. One of the things that we're launching soon is the ability to integrate into the PNOY report biomarkers from every other assessment you may be doing. Also, we have lots of exciting updates, on our hardware platform. And so, for us, the name of the game is, breath analysis is perhaps one of the most foundational assessments that any person could do. So we want to make it as accessible as possible. How often do you repeat the PNOY test after the first visit? I think Jerry mentioned every 3 months is a decent cadence of doing retests. Is that right, Jerry?
I feel like it is. I'm quite often it's a marker of convenience for the clinic because I'm seeing them anyway for a follow-up on traditional serological lab testing. They're typically in a fasted state. They've hopefully implemented some lifestyle changes within the past 3 months based on the prior PNOE. And so I feel like 3 months is a good, reasonable, cost-effective time frame for most people.
No,
And
that's awesome.
that 3
Yeah.
months is really when tangible adaptations to physical activity will occur, start to be noticeable.
Yeah, totally. And we get that question a lot, so let me also double down on that. One of the good things about PNOE is that it measures very fundamental things that will not change because of very transient and acute factors happening in your day-to-day, which speaks to what Dr. Scott just mentioned, which is you actually need to allow for a decent period of time of a reasonably effective intervention like nutrition, training, whatever, in order for these fundamental things to change in a way that is measurable. So 3 months is a reasonable time frame. Do you charge extra for the test? Jerry, go ahead, but then I would also like to add a few things on that because that's a very interesting point that I would like to talk about.
So our company adheres to, for the most part, in most cities, the recommended pricing that PNOE provides. And yes, we do charge for testing. I do tend to give that first one away as part of the intake because I just want them to be invested in the system. And most of the time when the patient sees the detailed report that PNOE provides via the awesome app that we're now using, they want to do more of it. They want to get their metabolic age down or below their actual chronological age. And so, again, I mentioned this earlier, they kind of see it as some sort of almost like a game to them. But again, I think placing a metric with some intervention is important to get the patient invested in it. And so, yeah, I give the first one away. You don't have to. There's some clinics don't. But then then after that point adhere to the recommended pricing from PNOE.
Yeah. And, a few thoughts on my end. And, by the way, folks, we posted a link on the chat. You guys can use it to schedule some time with one of my team members who can give you more information about PNOE and how it can be implement it in your practice and whatnot, but also if you have questions about the science. But what I wanted to touch upon is the fact that obviously every business is different, but by far the most effective way of implementing PNOE in a business is to effectively create a subscription around the test and around the services that we also offer, and also bring in the services that you offer. We don't just sell the test, we do nutrition programming, training programming, etc. But then if you also bring in your services, you can have a very effective subscription, which ultimately, if you work out the numbers, and we have a very comprehensive ROI calculator that we can share with you, again, schedule some time to talk to someone about that. You're going to see that, just by adding a few customers every month with a decent retention, you can actually get to tens of thousands of revenue on a monthly basis. So we get that question a lot. How much do you charge for the test? What is the recommended cost of the test? Obviously, there's an answer, and there's norms, and we can advise you on how much it would be reasonable to charge based on where you're located. But stop thinking about cost plus systems, whether it's PNOE or something else. Start thinking about subscription, recurring service. That's how you build predictability for your revenue and ultimately your business. That was one of the questions, if you don't mind sharing. Okay, so yeah, how much people charge for the test? Again, it varies a lot based on where you're located. It's very different if you're running PNOE tests in downtown Manhattan. Equinox is one of our customers. They do PNOE tests now for a big chunk of their member base. But then the cost there is very different versus doing PNOE tests in a low-income area. Curiosity question: does your business employ dietitians as well? Do you guys employ dietitians or not?
We do in some environments. A lot of times we third party those and make relationships local to the community you're in, because one of the problems we have is being nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's even simple things like accents and language barriers can off-put or offset patients. And so we do use dietary services, but try to make them local to the clinics that we operate in, not just necessarily like one central person doing all of them.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. I get it. And then another question is there a way to check markers to optimize fertility? The answer is yes, indirectly. There's a lot of studies around end-tidal CO2, parasympathetic and sympathetic activation, as well as breathing rate related to a woman's cycle. And so the PNOE test could be used in that capacity in some way. So obviously, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I would highly recommend that you schedule a call and you talk to someone about the science of that. Our colleagues can help you out. And then we have a few more from Jackie. How can PNOE's metabolic testing and enhanced hormone optimization treatments and GLP-1s? Yes. Oh, GLP-1 is a very, very important topic. And it sort of goes back to what Dr. Scott was alluding to earlier, which is metabolic slowdown. And, metabolic slowdown can occur if you're cutting calories, but then more so if you're on GLP-1s. Multiple studies have now shown muscle loss, reduction in thermogenesis, all of that cumulatively will amount to a reduction in your metabolic rate. And the problem with reducing your metabolism is that ultimately it becomes a big problem. It becomes a very difficult pit to get out of. And so if you have someone on a medical, regular weight loss program or medically supervised weight loss program with GLP-1s, super important to be doing RMR testing to see that their metabolism is not declining. In addition to that, it's not just metabolic rate, it's also another marker that is very important to keep track of. It's the fat burn efficiency or mitochondrial function. That's how it appears in our report. The underlying biomarker is something called respiratory exchange ratio. And we've seen that happening a few times on people who are on GLP-1s, especially the ones who are also quite active. So what we see is that people get on GLP-1, they tremendously reduce their caloric intake, but then they are not the average person on GLP-1s. They're quite active. They hit the gym and they continue hitting the gym for while they're on GLP-1s. And what that ends up causing is too much physiological stress on the system that manifests in mitochondrial dysfunction. It's not just toxins, bad food, lack of sleep, or inactivity that can cause mitochondrial dysfunction. It's also overstressing the system and overtraining. And whether you're overtraining or not is also a factor of how much you're eating and how much you're recovering. So if all of a sudden you slash your calories by 50%, but you're maintaining the same levels of physical activity, you are very much in a state of overtraining, and that will cause fat burn efficiency to go down, will make it harder for your cells to burn fat, and ultimately you are sort of hampering the positive effect of GLP-1. So another reason why someone on hormone therapy, and specifically GLP-1 therapy, should be tracking their metabolism. And
well said.
Yeah. And thank you, Jackie, for the shout out to Pavlos. I'm actually meeting him in a little bit. They're all, the whole team, not the whole, part of the team is here in Miami.
And George, Constantine, George, and Pavlos. Yeah, all the
all of them are in Miami. We have the Calm conference by New BioAge, one of our other very, very well-esteemed customers. They're doing like a gathering of 300 to 400 integrative physicians attending it, so we're there as well. Okay, last question before we go. Do you offer testing in Dallas, Fort Worth? Yeah, plenty of affiliates there. Reach out to us. We can set you up with someone. And that was pretty much it. Jerry and Scott, thank you so much for this very insightful discussion. I think a lot of our listeners have gotten very interesting insights from what you've shared. And guys, if you have further questions, please feel free to email them to us, schedule some time, and we can direct them to Jerry and Dr. Scott for further clarifications if needed. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. We really love our partnership with your company. We look forward to growing with all of us together as a whole, and everyone benefits. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate it. Bye.
All right.
Take care.